you ever feel like you're living in a dream? Like one day you just woke up, and everything until then had just been one vivid, prolonged dream after another. But you don't remember falling asleep. And then you blink. And that's all it takes to wake up again. Did you wake up the first time? Were you just dreaming then? It feels like you're awake now, and you blink and it happens again. Are you dreaming right now? Are you awake? Am I awake? My earliest memory is of waking up. I was sitting in the middle back seat of the family car, and I had just woken up from a nap, and I was struck by how empty my mind was. I couldn't remember who I was. I didn't have any memories. And I could feel that blank emptiness, thick, the absence of anything. My mind was like a blank sheet of paper. I couldn't remember who I was. Did I have a name? I knew I had a name. Probably. But I couldn't remember. But there were some things I did know. I did know some things. I knew that it was my baby sister asleep in the car seat next to me. I knew it was my parents in the front seats. I knew we were in a car going somewhere. The road lifted and curved and rose and fell, and it felt so familiar. I could almost recognize the trees on either side of the road, big birch and pine trees, real tall, like walls all the way as far as the eye could see. But I couldn't remember who I was. So I lean forward, and I look up at my parents' faces, and I know I recognize them. But I feel like I'm seeing them for the very first time. And I ask, Mom, Dad, where are we going? And my mom turns to me with this big, big smile, and she says, we're going to Talkeetna, Mallory. And then I had my name. But I still couldn't remember who I was. My mind was still that blank sheet of paper, but now it didn't have letters or words, but it had shapes, outlines of shapes, overflowing with absence. And I went back to my nap, but I don't remember falling asleep. I was the kind of kid that always felt more present in my dreams and daydreams. So I would inject my dreams into my real life by telling stories. I started in the front yard telling my little sister stories with characters that were butterflies and bees and flowers. Once upon a time and space, there lived a young fairy. She was a fairy with a special ability. She could take pieces of who she was inside, and she could put them inside objects. And she had a special affinity for stones. She would become overwhelmed, overflowing with some new emotion or idea or experience, and she would channel it all into the stones until they were glowing inside with a unique aspect of her soul. And then she would give them away. One at a time, specially chosen, she would give them away. And she would feel relief, an unburdening with the giving. One day, the fairy fluttered into a human town, and she found a whole group of human children playing, and it looked like so much fun. She wanted to join them, so she made herself look like a human girl, and she joined, and they played all day long. And at the end of the day, she loved the children so much, she gave each one of them a stone, carefully chosen, one at a time. And she promised that she would come back and visit. And she did. Years passed, and every time she would visit, the children would be a little older. Until one day the kids became adults. And she decided she wanted to stay for longer and experience living with them in this human town, and experience being a part of them. And she still spent time with all of her old friends, and she gained new ones too. And still she gave away her stones, each carefully chosen, one at a time. And she gave, 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 and as time went on, it began to change. It didn't feel the same. Before, everything she gave away felt like it was extra. Like there was so much inside herself she just couldn't contain it. And it made her feel so good to love and to give. But as time went on, each stone began to feel like it had been carved out of her, leaving her empty, filled with holes, hollow inside, until she didn't know who she was. And then I woke up. And I don't remember falling asleep. I know I was dreaming, but this is real life now. Was I awake before? Doesn't matter, I'm awake now. And I look around and I realize I'm lost. I'm on a hunt hunting trip with my dad. We drove 250 miles up the Denali Highway into the middle of nowhere, Alaska, Bonanza Creek, which is a lot more like a river than a creek. And the plan was to haul a canoe full of our things 5 miles upriver. And then we would set up camp, but with all the bends in the river, it was more like 15 miles. And on the second day of this, it was my dad's turn to haul the canoe through the water. And he turned to me and he said, "Mallory, you want to take a shortcut?" See that peak in the distance? Walk toward that peak until you reach the river again, and I'll catch up. An hour later, I still haven't reached the river. Turns out he was pointing at the wrong peak. And so I'm lost, alone, because even the dog would rather go walk with my dad than with me. Deep in wild Alaskan bear country, grizzly country, literally hundreds of miles from the nearest hint of civilization. And as I realize my predicament, I begin to notice something. I am not scared. I look inside myself and I'm trying to find some scrap of fear. But the absence of pain feels like peace instead. I'm looking, but it's just blank. I'm not afraid of anything. And I realize it's because hundreds of miles away from the nearest hint of civilization, I realize I'm more afraid of people than I am of bears, or death, or losing myself. It's starting to get dark, so I grew up in the middle of nowhere, Alaska. I know what to do. And I find my way back to the river. And I walk until I find a great stone sticking out in the middle of the water. And I sit there and I watch the sun setting over the pine and birch trees on the horizon while I wait for my dad to find me. Once upon a time in space, there lived a young fairy who couldn't remember who she was. Her mind was like a blank sheet of paper. There were things that she knew. She knew she was a fairy, even though she didn't have any memories of being a fairy. And she knew that she'd been living in this human town with people who took and took everything she gave until there was nothing left. And then she woke up. And her mind felt like a blank sheet of paper, fresh, new. And she decided to write her name. I told my mom about that earliest memory of mine, and she gave me this look, this weird look, and she stared at me for a while. Until finally she explained that I had spoken my very first full, complete sentence when I was 2 years old in the back of the car while we were driving to Talkeetna.